Well, the fact that I'm dressed in my very Afrocentric African attire, I wear this button, which is a very important symbol of my heritage and pride, and also a message. It embodies the message that emancipation was not what we think it is. It represents a year that the enslaved were actually allowed to be fully emancipated. Everything that I do today is completely connected to who I am from the inside out. I claim all of that.
Because I've been socialized in the West, my race has become part of my work.
Mm-hmm,
I cannot avoid it. First of all, there's a need for it. There's a thirst for it. And in a way, I feel I've been nudged towards it because I've always felt different. I've never really felt British. I definitely don't feel Dutch. So the reference point has always been other. Do you feel that if you'd been if you'd been white and Dutch, do you think you'd have the same obsession? Maybe, or maybe not.
Well, see, that's like asking me to change my skin. I have no relationship to what that would be like. So
or rather, let me flip it. Do you think that your race and being in the West has steered you towards your study of the story, these narratives?
Well, I think my quest for wanting to understand where I came from, who were my people, what does it mean to be from Suriname or from the Netherlands, or that was so intertwined with my also frustration, right? I was frustrated by the fact that no one seemed to know in my family, or that it was not being taught in the school. That I have to say that my race is directly related to that. Being a black woman is just an integral part of the journey. I can't separate them. I can't pull that apart and say, without me, if I was a man in black, then this would be my experience. If I am who, this is it. This is the package I came in. And I think it's important too that my age is equally as important to that, because I am a mature woman. I'm not a 20-year-old on this quest. If I had this kind of self-knowledge at 20, I don't know where I'd be, even further along than I am today. So I think all of those things are interrelated, they're intertwined, they're woven together. So even more like a fabric, they are linked forever.
So we're coming to the end of the interview.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you about, in terms of your work and in terms of how you present yourself to the world, do you think that your culture and heritage are integral also in the way you present yourself?
Absolutely. The way that I present myself on the outside, you mean? Well, the fact that I'm dressed in my very Afrocentric African attire, I wear this button, which is a very important symbol of my heritage and pride, and also a message. It embodies the message that emancipation was not what we think it is. It represents a year that the enslaved were actually allowed to be fully emancipated. And for me, this journey is about the unfinished business. We are all on a journey, and we have not yet completed our task. And the person who created this symbol, Perez Yongloy, passed away recently. And he was a soldier, and he really does embody the spirit of what I'm trying to do in educating, in also enlightening. And so everything that I do today is completely connected to who I am from the inside out. I claim all of that.
Last question. What was the turning point where you embraced your heritage, embraced your race?
Wow.
What was that?
Great question. I can tell you definitively it was when I went to Suriname for the first time. For my whole life, I had no real relationship to Suriname other than a place that my mother and father and ancestors came from. And it was actually my journey to Amsterdam, to the Netherlands, when I first started my studies, that I first identified the plantations where my family came from. And that same year, or later that year, I went to Suriname on for research purposes. And I spent hours in the archives. I went and found the locations of plantations. I went there, sat on the soil. I touched the land. My great aunt is our family griot. She's passed away, but she gave me specific instructions to reconnect to the sea, to bathe myself in the water, to cleanse myself. That was the moment when I realized, was by Frank Dragnenstein, called enslave, to be enslaved. And that for me was a moment when we accepted and embraced, when we thought, well, there's no Dutch word for enslaved. Well, then let's create one. That's a good question. I think that language is evolving within the Dutch language context. And it's evolving because we are pushing it forward. We are insisting that we become more clear about how important language is used or misused in this way. I'll give you an example. In writing the first book, the Amsterdam Slavery Heritage Guide, and when it was published in 2014, one of the things the co-authors, we struggled a lot with, which is language, is translation. Some things just don't translate the same impact from English to Dutch or Dutch to English. But it was so important to me that we come to terms with that. Find words or create words or terms that were not commonly used in Dutch so that they don't misappropriate when you translate them to English. A term like slave. This word, if you look at literature and how you use the word slave, it assumes that someone is born a slave or born into slavery. And that's just not true. We are born in a completely natural form and are socialized to become slaves. So we thought, okay, there's a word that is used in English to be enslaved, which is a process. Let's come up with this word. And I had learned from one of my colleagues, Frank Dragnenstein, who was the first person I had heard use the word enslaafd gemaakte, which is a similar translation to enslaved. And when we finally came to agree on that, that was a real important turning point. And since then, I'm noticing it's a process. It takes time. We're still have moments where it doesn't work, as we look at exhibitions, for example. But I think becoming aware that how important language is, to not disavowing or to not, alienating even further people who have been subjected to the use of language in that negative way. So yes, I would have to say it is changing for the better, but we have a long way to go, and it's up to all of us to take part in that process.
Well, I could talk to you for hours. I think we're probably going to do another interview at some point.
Okay.
But for the purposes of the platform and introducing you, I think this is really wonderful. I'd like to leave the last thing to you. Do you have any other comment maybe about this interview, how you feel about it, or any other feedback you want? Please share.
Well, I think I really appreciate you taking this initiative. It also helps me to kind of process my own thoughts and how they've evolved and changed. And wow, I think that's how I really feel about it. So I applaud you for taking on this task. I'm sure there are going to be challenges along the way. Don't be discouraged. Even when people tell you it's not necessary, don't believe that. It really is. We have to start using our own voices and telling our own stories in every format, in every way that we possibly can. So thank you for doing it.
Please like and subscribe. Heritage Tours Films.